Imagine a factory, but not, Victorian steam-powered stuff. Think Stone Age.
Right.
A surprisingly sophisticated operation run by a species maybe you still think of as, well, a bit primitive.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really, really groundbreaking finds from Germany that are just completely rewriting how we see Neanderthals.
Yeah, specifically their skills in the kitchen, you could say, and how they managed resources.
Exactly. These finds are revealing these ancient fat factories. It turns a lot of old ideas upside down.
Completely. It touches on their intelligence, their technology.
So yeah, we're looking at some recent studies here. There's a big one in Science Advances from early July.
That's the one. It focuses on excavations at Neumark-Nord, near Leipzig.
And the sheer amount of evidence is staggering, isn't it? Thousands upon thousands of bone bits, artifacts.
Oh, absolutely. It paints this incredibly detailed picture of life 125,000 years ago.
So our mission today is really to unpack how these, our ancient cousins, were getting hold of vital nutrients.
What it tells us about how smart and adaptable they were.
And why this discovery pushes back the timeline for complex food processing by a whole lot.
Tens of thousands of years, yeah. Get ready for some real aha moments about Neanderthals.
Okay, so the big reveal. What exactly did the archaeologists find?
They found clear, undeniable evidence that Neanderthals in central Germany were rendering fat from bones 125,000 years ago.
125,000 years, that's huge.
It's a massive shift. I mean, think about it. Before this, the oldest evidence for fat rendering, even by us, by modern humans, was only about 28,000 years old.
Wow.
So Neanderthals were doing this complex thing roughly 100,000 years earlier.
That's incredible.
It really is. The study calls it surprisingly creative and innovative behavior, far beyond the old stereotypes.
Astonishing. Okay, so let's get into the why. Why fat? Why go to all that trouble?
Well, fat was just essential, especially for hunter-gatherers. Think about harsh winters, lean times.
When the meat available might not have much fat on it naturally.
Exactly. And eating too much lean meat on its own is actually dangerous.
Ah, you're talking about rabbit starvation, protein poisoning.
That's the one. If you eat tons of lean protein but not enough fat or carbs, you get seriously ill.
And Neanderthals, with their very meat-heavy diet, they'd be prime candidates for that risk.
Precisely. So they needed a reliable fat source. Plus, purely from an energy standpoint.
More bang for your buck, calorie-wise.
Over twice the calories per gram compared to protein or carbs. It's just incredibly efficient fuel, crucial for survival in tough climates.
Okay, so it's vital. Where were they getting it? What parts of the animal?
Well, the obvious places have fat, like brain, tongue, brisket, ribs, organs.
Right.
But the real key here, the most reliable source, is inside the bones, the marrow and the cancellous bone, that spongy stuff.
Why was that more reliable?
Because those fat stores, the marrow and spongy bone fat, they tend to stick around even when an animal is stressed or undernourished. Other body fat can deplete dramatically.
Ah, okay, so it's the most consistent source.
Exactly, a dependable resource season after season.
And having that consistent high-calorie diet, how does it play into their overall success, evolutionarily speaking?
It's fundamental. Better nutrition means longer lifespans, better reproductive success.
More energy for hunting, for raising young.
Absolutely. It fuels everything. It underpins their resilience, their ability to adapt. It's a huge factor in their evolutionary journey.
So this fat factory, it sounds like quite the setup. Walk us through it. What does the archaeology actually show us, how they do it?
Okay, so the process itself was, frankly, a ton of work.
Labor-intensive, you mean?
Hugely. First, they had to break the bones, not just snap them, but smash them into really small bits, using stone hammers, stone anvils.
Okay.
Then they'd take these fragments and boil them.
Boil them. How?
Well, that's the tricky part, finding direct evidence for. Maybe pits lined with hides, maybe bark containers. We don't have preserved boiling pots, but the boiling is key.
Because the fat would separate out.
Exactly. It's less dense than water, so it rises to the top. Let it cool. Skim it off.
Okay, so what's the hard evidence for that process, beyond just finding bones?
Oh, the evidence is really compelling. Just from one specific area, Neumark-Nord 22b, they found over 118,000 bone fragments.
118,000.
From one spot.
Yep, and most of them deliberately broken down to less than 3 centimeters.
Wow. That's not accidental breakage.
Not a chance. That's systematic processing on an almost industrial scale, really, designed for maximum extraction.
What animals are we talking about?
The remains point to at least 172 large mammals,
Right.
lots of horse, lots of bovids like aurochs, those big extinct wild cattle.
So, a significant number of animals.
Definitely. And the bones show that they were brought to this specific spot. This wasn't just butchering at a kill site. It was transport and dedicated processing. A fat factory zone.
And the tools. You mentioned hammers and anvils.
Yeah, they found Neanderthal-made hammerstones, some weighing over 2 kilos, and anvils. These weren't just any rocks. They were selected and used for this specific heavy-duty task of bone smashing. Okay, so no boiling pots found. Maybe they were perishable.
Right.
But what about fire? You need fire for boiling.
Abundant signs of fire right nearby. Charcoal deposits, nearly 2,000 tiny bits of heated bone.
Heated bone.
Yeah, mostly under a centimeter. Plus, heat-altered flint, heat-cracked rocks, all points to intense, sustained fire use, exactly what you'd need for boiling water.
This whole picture, it feels very deliberate. Intensive, organized, strategic is how the researchers describe it.
That sums it up perfectly. This wasn't opportunistic scavenging. They were managing resources carefully.
Planning hunts, bringing carcasses back to a specific processing area.
Using a dedicated task-specific area, Dr. Litz Kindler, the lead author, he said, they understood both the nutritional value of fat and how to access it efficiently.
It sounds like what researchers call resource intensification.
Exactly. Getting the absolute most out of every resource. That's advanced thinking.
And just circling back to labor, smashing tens of thousands of bones into tiny pieces.
It's mind-boggling when you think about the time and effort. It really underscores how vital this fat must have been for them. They were committed.
Absolutely. So we've got this picture of how they did it, the sheer effort involved. What does this mean for our understanding of Neanderthals themselves? It really challenges that old brutish caveman stereotype, doesn't it?
Oh, it completely dismantles it. This isn't just about food. It's a direct window into their minds, their cognition.
How so?
It shows planning, thinking ahead, preparing for lean times, managing their environment, figuring out how to maximize nutrition when resources might be scarce. That's sophisticated intelligence.
And it fits with other things we've learned recently, right? Like
Well,
tool making, making glue, maybe even art.
Exactly. It's part of a growing picture of Neanderthals as much more complex, much more capable than we used to give them credit for.
It builds a much richer image.
It does. And Letz Kindler, the first author, made a great point about how this research is really about finding the similarities between us and them.
Bridging that gap.
Yeah. Seeing the shared cognitive abilities, the shared problem solving, it connects us more deeply to our ancient relatives.
What made this particular site, Neumark-Nord, so special? Why were we able to learn so much here?
Neumark-Nord. It's an amazing location. It used to be a lake landscape near Leipzig in Germany.
And the finds go way back.
Way back. Artifacts up to 400,000 years old. But this fat factory layer, that's dated specifically to 125,000 years ago, long before modern humans showed up in Europe.
And the preservation. You mentioned it was incredible.
Almost unbelievably good. Exceptionally rich and well-preserved is the technical term. Meaning things were buried quickly. There was very little disturbance after they were left there. Almost no signs of carnivores gnawing on the bones. Only 11 specimens out of thousands showed any trace.
Wow.
So it's what archaeologists call a primary context. Things are pretty much as the Neanderthals left them. That's incredibly rare and valuable for understanding exactly what happened.
And it wasn't just the fat factory there, right? It was part of the bigger picture.
Definitely. The whole Neumark-Nord complex was like an entire ecosystem they were interacting with. There were different zones for different activities.
Like what?
Well, areas focused on deer hunting, other spots specifically for processing elephants.
Elephants. Wow.
Yeah, and rhinos, too. Remains of, I think, 76 rhinos and 40 elephants were found at nearby related sites. And then you have this very specialized fat rendering area. It shows a really organized use of the landscape.
Were they there all year round? Or just seasonally?
The evidence points to year-round activity. They were hunting hoofed animals like horses and aurochs in all seasons.
Okay.
What's interesting is that carnivores, bears, wolves seem to have been hunted mainly in the autumn.
Why then?
Well, possibly for their fat stores, which would be highest before winter,
Yeah.
or maybe for their pelts.
Right. And the fat factory itself, Was it used continuously for centuries or more like intense bursts?
It seems like the latter. The accumulation happened over a relatively short time. Estimates range from maybe 280 to 450 years.
That's relatively short in archaeological terms.
It is. Or it could even represent just one or a very few really intense periods where they brought in a massive amount of bone material and processed it. Focused bursts of activity.
Okay, so stepping back to the bigger picture, what else does this discovery suggest about Neanderthal life in society?
Well, one really fascinating idea it boosts is food storage. Caching.
Hiding food away for later.
Sort of, think about it. You've got bones from over 170 large animals concentrated in this one small processing area. Plus, they're hunting year-round.
Right.
It suggests they might have been collecting and stashing these fat-rich bones, maybe over months or even longer.
Creating a stockpile.
Exactly. And then processing that cache in one or more intensive sessions. Caching is a big deal for foragers, especially in middle or northern latitudes. It requires foresight, planning.
Maybe even cooperation.
Yeah.
Managing a shared resource.
Potentially, yeah. It suggests they weren't just living hand to mouth. They were managing resources over time, thinking seasons ahead.
And while fat was clearly crucial, they weren't only eating fat and meat, were they? The environment offered other things.
Oh, absolutely. Neumark-Nord during that interglacial period was rich in plants. Hazelnuts, acorns, blackthorn berries, cattails, reeds, grasses. Lots of predictable plant foods.
So the fat might have been an addition.
Could be. Maybe added to vegetable stews, maybe rendered and stored dried to boost nutrition year-round. It points towards a much more balanced, integrated diet, using everything the environment offered.
There's also a point made by Professor Will Robrooks about the impact of all this hunting, especially the big game like elephants and rhinos.
Yes, that's a really important consideration. Hunting slow reproducing animals on that scale, it would have undoubtedly had a significant effect on the local animal populations back then.
So they weren't just passive inhabitants. They were actively shaping their environment.
They absolutely were, which, again, challenges old ideas. It also underlines that Neanderthals were adaptable, flexible. They were doing different things at different places and at different times in this landscape.
Not just one monolithic Neanderthal behavior.
Exactly. You see everything from quick marginal butchering at some sites to this incredibly intensive, exhaustive processing of every last nutrient at the fat factory. It shows real complexity in their strategies.
And maybe, just maybe, this kind of intensive fat processing was more common than we think. It's just that Neumark-Nord had that amazing preservation.
That's a very real possibility. Bone grease extraction might have been a widespread technique, maybe even going further back in time.
But the evidence usually just doesn't survive.
Precisely. Weathering, scavengers, soil conditions.
Yeah.
They usually erase these subtle clues. Neumark-Nord gives us this rare, clear glimpse that makes you wonder what else we're missing elsewhere.
So, to wrap up our deep dive, we've journeyed into these Neanderthal fat factories, and it's revealed so much more than just a cooking technique.
Right. It shows a complex species, capable of planning, strategy, incredible resource management, and a deep understanding of their world.
It really does reshape their image so profoundly.
It forces us to rethink so much about our shared past.
So, the final thought for you, our listener. If Neanderthals were this smart, this adaptable, managing resources, maybe even impacting their ecosystems, what else don't we know?
Yeah, what other sophisticated behaviors are still hidden, waiting to be discovered?
And how much of what we like to think of as uniquely human might actually have much deeper roots shared with our ancient relatives than we ever dared to imagine?
It definitely leaves you thinking, doesn't it?